Oh, let's start a war.
Privyet, my tovarishchi. Welcome back to Ranking Every Assassin's Marksmanship. I'm Comrade Vadim, and today we're going to be breaking down one of the most consequential assassinations in all of history, the killing of Archduke Franz Ferdinand by Gavrilo Princip. We'll uncover who these two pivotal figures were, detail the dramatic events leading up to the assassination, and then we'll head out to the range to recreate this assassination firsthand to see how difficult of a shot it would have been for Gavrilo Princip. Also, real quick, before we get started, if you enjoy these videos, can you please leave a comment down below and tell me what you enjoy about these videos or what maybe needs some tweaking. I'd like to know if you enjoy these long biographical sections or if you'd like to see a more expanded, detailed range section and leave a history lesson at home. Anyways, let's dive right in. Archduke Franz Ferdinand Karl Ludwig Joseph Maria of Austria was born December 18th, 1863 in Graz, Austrian Empire. He was nephew to both the Emperor of Austria as well as the Second Mexican Empire. Although he was born into a royal family, he wasn't exactly super wealthy. I mean, he was wealthy, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't a step above every single other person in the world, and he wasn't in line to become ruler of any nation at the time of his birth. It was through two major events that set him apart from anyone else in the region in both wealth and power. First, at only 11 years old, Franz's ultra-wealthy cousin died, leaving his entire inheritance to Franz. And this set him apart from being wealthy through family ties and royal connections to being one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest person in the entire region. Then in 1889, when Franz was only 25 years old, his uncle's son, the one who's Emperor of Austria, entered a suicide pact with his mistress, leaving his uncle no sons to inherit his empire. This led to Franz's father becoming heir to the throne until his death 7 years later, leaving none other than Franz to be next in line. Franz was now split between readying himself for the throne and enjoying his life as one of the wealthiest men in the entire world. He particularly enjoyed hunting, and he traveled all around the world to hunt anything from deer, kangaroos, emus, elephants, and anything else he could find. All in all, Ferdinand kept track of every single one of his kills in his diary, and they ended up totaling 272,511 kills, 100,000 of which were taxidermized and displayed in his Bohemian castle. Outside of hunting and adventuring, him and his wife Sophia would travel the continent on official royal business. This meant anything from social events with rulers throughout Europe to visiting newly annexed nations to establish the presence of the empire in those new states. And that's exactly what Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie were doing in Bosnia and Herzegovina in 1914 after the 1908 annexation of that territory. Gavrilo Princip was born July 25, 1894 in Austro-Hungarian Bosnia to Peter and Maria Princip. The Princips were an extremely poor agrarian serb family, often oppressed and abused by their Ottoman rulers and landlords due to their Orthodox faith. At the age of 9, Gavrilo was given the opportunity to receive a formal education in Sarajevo, a luxury that the rest of the family couldn't get because of the labor requirements needed to upkeep the family farm. Gavrilo attended school in Sarajevo for many years. Eventually that region got a shock as the Austro-Hungarian Empire annexed that region from the Ottomans. This wasn't popular because many of the Serbs, Croats, Slovenes, Bosniaks, and all the Slavs yearned for complete independence. Because of these events, at the age of 17, Princip joined Young Bosnia, a separatist revolutionary clan whose end goal was to end Austro-Hungarian occupation in Bosnia and Herzegovina by any means necessary. Princip became a very influential member of this group and was responsible for high levels of recruitment from his school until he was eventually expelled for his involvement in public demonstrations. For many years, Princip continued his education while becoming more and more radical. That is until his friend showed him a newspaper clipping showing him that the Archduke would be visiting Sarajevo in the summer. Deciding his own fate, Princip got to work. Princip was able to get in contact with a member of the Black Hand, an ultra-separatist Serbian movement that aligned closely with his beliefs. Siganovic, his access within the Black Hand, was able to get him and two of his co-conspirators access to 5 Browning FN Model 1910s, 6 hand grenades, and a few capsules of cyanide for when the job was done. Princip and the 2 other revolutionaries then got to work recruiting a few other helpers and impatiently awaited for the Archduke's arrival in the summer. It's now June 28, 1914. Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sofia are visiting Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Tensions are high across the city and the region as a whole, as many ethnic Serbs, Croats, and Bosniaks resent the Austro-Hungarian Empire, who had annexed the region a few years prior. To add to the insult, today is Vidovdan, the anniversary of the Battle of Kosovo, and the Serbs see the Archduke's visit as a deliberate insult and an attempt to show imperial dominance. The couple had a motorcade planned through the city, and a crowd started to form along the route. Spread throughout the route was 6 Bosnian revolutionaries armed with grenades and FN Model 1910s. The motorcade first passed by Muhammad and Vaso, who were each armed with a grenade, but both failed to act. Next, the motorcade passed by Kabranovic. Kabranovic was armed with a grenade and threw the grenade at the Archduke's car. However, the grenade bounced off the vehicle and only detonated after the Archduke's vehicle was outside the danger zone of the device. However, the grenade did detonate and injure about 20 people, which caused the Archduke's motorcade to rush to the next destination, leaving the next 3 assassins unable to act. After a meeting with his advisors, Archduke Franz Ferdinand demanded he continue his motorcade through the city, as the whole city can't be full of assassins. So they set off along their route until their driver missed a turn. The driver threw the car into reverse, but the car stalled. Coincidentally, this occurred at the exact corner Gavrilo Princip was waiting at. This was his moment. Gavrilo ran up to the car, stepped up onto the footboard, equalized himself to the Archduke and raised the gun, and shot twice, hitting Archduke Franz Ferdinand once in the neck and hitting his wife Sofia once in the stomach. It's unclear if Princip tried to continue firing or if he tried to turn his weapon on himself, but he was immediately tackled and disarmed before any other shots could be fired. Alright, on to the fun part. For this assassination, the Black Hand provided Gavrilo Princip and the 5 other assassins access to both grenades and Browning FN Model 1910s. However, Gavrilo Princip only utilized the Model 1910. Now, I've already talked about this gun extensively earlier in this season in the Huey Long episode. Go check it out. But I will give you the Reader's Digest version of it today, but if you want more information, go check out that video. The FN Model 1910 is a Belgian-made handgun chambered in both 32 ACP and 380 auto. I have an example here chambered in 380 auto, just like Gavrilo Princip's was. It was designed by the famous John Moses Browning and first produced in 1910. Personally, I love this gun. It's super cool, it's very ergonomic, it's very simple to use, and it is absolutely gorgeous. The only qualms I have with it that I break down in that other video is that the length of the pistol grip here is a little awkward in my hand, but that's just for my sizing. And then the major issue with it, in my opinion, is that the sight here is just a notch milled in the slide of the gun, and it has a very tiny front sight post there, to where if you are doing any sort of distance shooting that requires you to use those and not just, you know, intuition shooting, it's going to be really hard to take subsequent shots and refine that front sight post after getting a little bit of recoil even. It is just that hard to see. So overall, I really do like this gun. It's a lot of fun to shoot. It's a beautiful example, and it will be great in the recreation later in this video. And it's no wonder that this gun was used in so many famous assassinations. Now, before we can go out to the range and recreate this shot, we need to look into the specifics, that way we can best recreate it and get the best assessment of what exactly happened for Princip. So as the Archduke's motorcade was going to its next destination, due to the bombing earlier in the day, they changed the route up a little bit, and as the driver was passing by that new change in route, they had forgot the turn, stopped the car, put it in reverse, and that's when the driver stalled the vehicle. And it just so happened that this was the exact corner that Gavrilo Princip was waiting at. Gavrilo, of course, took this opportunity, pushed through the crowd, approached the vehicle, stepped up onto the footboard of the vehicle to equalize himself with both the Archduke and his wife, and took 2 shots, hitting Archduke Franz Ferdinand 1 time in the neck and his wife Sophia once in the stomach. This resulted in mortal wounds for both the Archduke and his wife, who both passed a short time later. Now, it's unclear if Princip attempted to keep firing into the vehicle, or if maybe he stepped down and attempted to turn the weapon on himself. Either way, he was tackled and disarmed, but this didn't prevent him from taking his cyanide pill. Well, the aftermath of this assassination may be one of the most famous aftermaths of any assassination because of its consequences, which we'll get to in just a minute. Let's take a quick look at what happened to the Archduke and his wife and Princip before we get to the really interesting part. So as mentioned earlier, Franz suffered a wound to his neck, while Sophia suffered a wound to her stomach. Both were critically wounded. They were going in and out of consciousness, attempting to talk to each other, and then they both died on the way to the hospital. Franz first, Sophia next, but neither of them made it to the hospital. Princip, though, arguably had a even worse end than Franz and his wife because his demise was slow and painful. Very slow and very painful. Like I mentioned earlier, he was able to take his cyanide pill, but as the other assassins learned earlier in the day, those cyanide pills were old and didn't work, so at best he probably got really sick from it, but it didn't kill him. He was beaten and arrested, where he would wait for his trial. While waiting for the trial, the government rounded up 24 other individuals they linked to the attack, including all 5 of his other co-conspirators of the day, as well as many members from the Black Hand. The trial started 3.5 months after the attack, but it only lasted 2 weeks. By the end of the trial, 22 of the 25 were charged with high treason and murder, while the other 3 were charged with complicity to the murder. One thing that did come out of the trial is that Princip didn't intend to kill Sophia. Instead, he was intending to kill Oskar Paciorek, the governor of Bosnia and Herzegovina, who was in the vehicle with Archduke and his wife. By the end of the trial, Princip pled guilty and admitted to all his wrongdoings, but he maintained that he was proud of his act. He insisted on the unification of all Yugoslavs and the freedom from Austro-Hungarian rule. Luckily, or maybe even unluckily for Princip, he was only 19 years old at the time, making him ineligible for execution per the Habsburg law. This meant that he was sentenced to 20 years in prison, which was the maximum sentence for this crime. Despite this, the Austro-Hungarian rulers ensured that Gavrilo would see his demise, although it would be very slow and very painful. He spent the next almost 4 years in solitary confinement, chained to the same wall, until he died of malnutrition. Until his death, he maintained satisfaction with his act, insisted on the unification of all Yugoslavs, and distanced himself from any responsibility relating to the First World War. Wait. First World War? What does this have to do with the First World War? Well, that's why this assassination is one of the most famous in all of history, because of its consequences. Now let me set the record straight before we go into the deep dive. Europe was already in a tense geopolitical climate, and these events were already occurring, but they were sped up through this event. Now, it's unclear if the culmination of these events, World War I, would happen without Gavrilo Princip assassinating Archduke Franz Ferdinand. That's up for debate, but there were many of these things that were already in motion before this act occurred, but it all just exploded because of this. So to set the stage, Europe was split into 2 camps. We had the Triple Entente, which was Russia, France, and Britain, and then you had the Triple Alliance of Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy. In the far east of Europe, the Ottoman Empire was in a sharp decline, leaving a large power vacuum in that Balkan region for the Slavic people. This included two Balkan wars which had just finished years prior, as well as an ever-growing pan-Slavic movement. But then this assassination occurred, which left the Austrian-Hungarian Archduke and his wife dead at the hands of 25 Serbs, or at least that's how the Austro-Hungarians presented this to the world. This resulted in Austria-Hungary blaming Serbia for the attack and setting an ultimatum which Serbia would in end find unacceptable. After much internal debate, Serbia begrudgingly accepted most of the terms proposed by their rulers. Austro-Hungarian leaders, though still likely filled with immense amounts of emotion, refused to accept this 95% agreement between the two nations and subsequently declared war on Serbia. Since Serbia is an ally to Russia, Russia began ramping up its military power and even mobilized soldiers to the Balkans. Of course, Germany had to protect its ally Austria-Hungary, so it began ramping up its military power as well and declared war on Russia. Due to the alliances in the Triple Entente, Germany then also declared war on France and mobilized its troops through Belgium to get to France. This then resulted in Britain declaring war on Germany for violating Belgium's neutrality, and the rest is history. World War I had began, and pretty soon there would be bodies stacked in mass graves all across Europe, deeper than the alliances that started the war. But there's still one major question left to be answered, and that's how good of a marksman Gavrilo Princip really was. So let's go out to the range, set up this shot, and recreate it to figure out just exactly how good of a marksman Princip really was. The Vadim. Hello guys. Thank you, past Comrade Vadim, for that great story. Now we are out at the range and we're going to recreate the shot that Gavrilo Princip did on both Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife. Here I have a FN Model 1910. I want to thank today's sponsor who allowed us to have such a beautiful gun for this recreation, Comrade Vadim. Please, like and subscribe, guys. It's expensive. I want to give you the best content here. So as we just heard, Gavrilo Princip waited on that corner, and as they stalled the car, he took that opportunity, stepped up on the Archduke and his wife's car, and shot them each a single time. So we're going to load up on here, we're going to set up our targets, we're going to do a few dry runs, and then we're going to do the shots a couple times, and then we'll be able to judge better on how difficult the shot really was. Let's go. So this 1910 is absolutely beautiful. But before we recreate the shot, let's do a couple warm-up shots to make sure this thing runs perfectly smooth today. Alright, so we're in the back of my truck, and here is Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie. We're going to set them up, precariously so, right on these. Hope the wind doesn't bother us too much, and do a couple dry runs here. I will be hopping up over here on the wheel well, and then taking two shots, one shot at each of them, and seeing how we do. Alright, so a little dry run here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to hop on the tire, act like Gavrilo, going up on the vehicle, and then it's going to be one shot, one shot. So, something like this. Boom, boom. I think that's pretty good. So, let's do it a few times, see how hard it is. Going hot. Oh, let's start a war. It's not too bad. Again. That one was good. I got the first target right in the head, and then the second target right in the chest again. I know there's quite a few bullets in there, but I saw both of those go in positively, which recreates both of their injuries historically. All right, and third time's a charm. Oh, failure. But I finished the job. So, as you can see, the Archduke did not have the best day today. Now, as far as Gavrilo Princip goes, going up on the car, engaging two targets, while here on the range feels quite easy. Of course, he was in a large crowd, there was a lot of pressure, you know, the car may have been starting to move again after it stalled, and then transitioning targets, based on the previous videos we've seen, has been a difficult task in the moment. So, while there's no super exceptional marksmanship, he did finish the task of getting both his targets, So I'm going to give him average marksmanship for this and put him in the C category. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Ranking Every Assassin's Marksmanship. If you did, make sure to check out the series on my channel, both the shorts and the long-form breakdowns. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. Tell me, do you think Gavrilo Princip was the most influential assassin in all of history? Well, until next time, do svidaniya.